The morning of October 12th began with the scent of old wood, black coffee, and the smell of pine drifting from the lake. The cabin was silent, save for the gentle lapping of water against the dock. It was a silence I had cultivated, a peace I had earned after a lifetime of noise. That peace was shattered at precisely 9:17 a.m. The oak door didn't just open, it exploded inward. The deadbolts, a solid piece of brass I'd installed myself, splintered from the frame like a gunshot. The door slammed against the interior cabin wall, a violent impact that shook the entire room. A small framed photo of my late wife Sarah rattled on the mantel. And then she was inside. Brenda Rourke, President, CEO, and self-appointed dictator of the Crestwood Lake Estates Homeowners Association. She didn't just enter a room, she conquered it. Her face was a mottled red mask of pure manufactured outrage, her eyes scanning the room like a bird of prey. "Thorn!" she screamed, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. She marched 3 steps in, her heels clicking aggressively on the old pine floor. She pointed a trembling, manicured finger at me. "I knew it! I knew you were violating the ordinance. This filth!" She spat the word, gesturing not just to the wildflowers Sarah had planted by the window, but to the entire cabin. "This entire structure is a violation, and your dock." I didn't move. My hands remained steepled in front of me on the table. My coffee, black and bitter, sat untouched. I simply kept my gaze level. My guest, a man in a simple plaid flannel shirt and a fishing vest who had been quietly enjoying his own coffee, didn't move either. He just watched, his expression one of mild curiosity, as if observing a particularly strange species of insect. "This is your final warning," Brenda barreled on, now moving toward my fireplace, her eyes cataloging every perceived flaw. She saw Sarah's photo, picked it up, and sneered. "Tacky. This is all so tacky." As I was saying, we filed the lien. My attorney is sitting in the car right now, she gestured vaguely toward the driveway, and we are proceeding with the foreclosure. This meeting, or whatever conspiracy you're planning with this person, she glanced at my guest with utter disdain, is over. You have 30 days to vacate, or we will have you removed, forcibly. She smiled then, a thin, predatory smile that was all teeth. She thought she had won. She had cornered the grieving old widower. She had secured another prime piece of lakefront property. I finally unlaced my fingers and placed my palms flat on the old pine table. The wood felt cool and solid beneath my hands. "You're quite right, Miss Rourke," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through her tirade and stopped her cold. She was so focused on her own power, so blinded by her own greed, that she never stopped to ask who I was. She never stopped to ask who I was meeting with. She never realized that she hadn't just trespassed on my property. She had just burst in, unannounced, on the sitting Attorney General of this state. This cabin wasn't just a house. It was a sanctuary. It was the last piece of my wife, Sarah, that I had left in this world. My name is Elias Thorne. For 42 years, I was a federal judge. I sat on the bench in a cold concrete building in the city, wearing a black robe, listening to the very worst that humanity had to offer. I weighed evidence. I studied deceit. I sent men to prison for the rest of their natural lives. My world was one of cold logic, binding precedents, and the letter of the law. When I retired, all I wanted was quiet. Sarah found this place, the old O'Malley cabin. It wasn't even for sale. It was built in the 1950s, a solid post and beam structure with a granite fireplace, long before the Crestwood Lake Estates HOA ever existed. It was a legacy property, grandfathered in, with water rights going back to the Truman administration, or so I thought. Sarah fell in love with it because it was real. It was imperfect. When she got sick, we bought it from the O'Malley grandkids. It was our project, our future. "Elias," she'd said, her voice thin but her eyes bright as we sat on the porch. "No more manicured lawns. I want to plant milkweed for the monarchs. I want ferns and columbine. I want it to be wild." We had one good summer here before the cancer returned. One. I spent that summer watching her plant those wildflowers, her hands in the dirt, a straw hat on her head. The happiest I had ever seen her. In the 18 months since her passing, I had done nothing but maintain it, exactly as she'd left it. I came here to grieve, to read, to sit on that old weathered dock, the one her grandfather had built by hand, and feel her presence in the lapping water. I came here to be left alone. But Brenda Rourke and the sterile, beige, soulless HOA she represented couldn't stand the sight of something authentic. They were building glass and steel monstrosities on the other side of the lake, houses with zero personality and million-dollar price tags. My cabin, my history, was a stain on their perfect, profitable brochure. This wasn't about wildflowers. This wasn't about a dock. This was about greed. It was about erasing a memory to make a profit. Brenda Rourke hadn't just picked a fight with a retired old man. She had declared war on my wife's legacy. And that was a fatal tactical error in judgment. The war started slowly, with whispers, then with paper. The first notice was polite, almost laughable. It arrived in a crisp, cream-colored envelope. Violation 3.4b, non-approved flora, $100 fine. I assumed it was a clerical error. I ignored it. The second notice, a week later, was more aggressive. Violation 7.1c, unsafe dock structure, $5,000 fine. It cited unapproved weathering and non-uniform paint. It was a 70-year-old dock. Of course it was weathered. I'm a judge. I understand the law. I reviewed my deed, my title, and the original county charters. I was 100% grandfathered. I sent them a polite, firm letter citing my property's legal standing and the state statutes that protected it. That's when I realized Brenda Rourke wasn't just a Karen. She was a predator. The response was a certified letter informing me that my grandfathered status was under review by the HOA's legal counsel. The fines doubled, then tripled. Daily penalties were added. Legal review fees were tacked on. I started talking to my neighbors, the other legacy property owners. Old Man Henderson, an 80-year-old widower, was being fined $500 a week because his vegetable garden, which his family had maintained since the 1960s, was visible from the lake. Mrs. Albright, a 75-year-old woman on a fixed income, was being threatened with a lien because her chimney smoke was aesthetically disruptive. We were all being targeted. The old-timers, the ones on fixed incomes, the ones with the best, most desirable lakefront views. Brenda wasn't a manager. She was a hunter, culling the herd. She was trying to bankrupt us, to force us to sell our heritage so she could tear down our history and put up another soulless mansion. Her surveillance became brazen. I'd see her white SUV idling at the end of my gravel driveway. I saw her taking photos, not just of the cabin, but of me. I saw her at a local diner, having a very friendly lunch with the county sheriff. A lunch that looked far more like a transaction than a friendship. That's when the judge in me woke up. This wasn't a dispute. This was a conspiracy. I did what I've done for 42 years. I followed the money. I pulled on my old suit, drove to the county seat, and spent 3 days in the dusty basement of the records office. The clerks, who knew me from my active days, gave me quiet access. The smell of old paper and microfilm felt like home, and the case I built was chilling. Brenda Rourke, it turned out, was not just the HOA president. She was a silent partner in Crestwood Luxury Developments, LLC, the only company approved to build on the lake. Red flag number 1. Every fraudulent fine she issued, every fabricated violation, every lien she filed was a tool. She was using the HOA's legal fund, our own money, to sue us, to force us out. Then she'd have the HOA buy the distressed property for pennies on the dollar, only to sell it directly to her own development company. Red flag number 2. The attorney she kept threatening us with, he was her son-in-law. The county sheriff who ignored our complaints, his re-election campaign had received a very large anonymous donation from a shell corporation, one that I traced back to Crestwood Luxury Developments. It was textbook wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, public corruption. And given the pattern across multiple properties, it was a classic racketeer-influenced and corrupt organization. It was a RICO case. She was running an organized crime syndicate from a laminated HOA rulebook. I had the evidence. I had the bank transfers, the shell corporations, the public filings, the illegal zoning variances she'd pushed through. But I was a retired federal judge. I had no active authority. I needed someone who did. I called the one man I trusted more than anyone, Rob Cantrell. We started as rookie DAs in the same small office 30 years ago. I went to the federal bench. He went into state politics. He was now the state attorney general. I called his private cell. "Rob," I said, "it's Elias." "Elias," his voice was warm. "You old ghost. I thought you'd be fishing full-time by now. What's on your mind?" "Rob," I said, "I think I've uncovered a multi-million-dollar real estate fraud ring masquerading as a homeowners association, and they've compromised the local sheriff." The warmth on the line vanished, replaced by the cold, sharp focus of a prosecutor. "Elias, are you sure? That's a heavy accusation." "I have the receipts," I said. "Bank transfers, LLC filings, the works. It's a clean RICO case, Rob. They're targeting the elderly. They're trying to steal my home, Sarah's home." There was a long silence. Then, "I'll be there Saturday, 7 a.m. Don't bring this to anyone else. Don't even look at the sheriff sideways. We'll go fishing, and you can show me everything." He arrived at 7 a.m. sharp in a beat-up Ford pickup, wearing a flannel shirt and a fishing vest. He looked every bit the part of a man on vacation. We sat at my pine table, the same one Sarah and I ate breakfast at. We spread out bank statements, corporate filings, and forged lien notices right next to our coffee cups. Rob looked grim. "Elias, this is worse than you said. This is one of the cleanest and dirtiest RICO cases I've ever seen. She's going to prison for a very, very long time." We were finalizing our plan. Rob was mapping out which state assets to freeze. And that's when Brenda Rourke, in her infinite, arrogant stupidity, chose to kick down my door. So there we were, the shattered door, the smell of pine, and her cheap, overbearing perfume. The screaming president, and the two men who had just finished mapping out her entire criminal enterprise. Brenda Rourke was still puffed up, drunk on her perceived power. She was still processing what I'd said. "What did you say?" she stammered, her victory high starting to fade, replaced by a flicker of confusion. "I said, Miss Rourke," I repeated, standing up slowly, "I am not a large man, but 40 years on the bench teaches you how to command a room. That I'd like to introduce you. You've met me, Judge Elias Thorne, retired, but this is my old friend, Robert Cantrell." Rob stood up too. He was taller than he looked sitting down. He took off his baseball cap, and the friendly, just a fisherman persona evaporated. What remained was the man who had argued and won 3 cases before the Supreme Court. "Miss Rourke," Rob said, his voice quiet but carrying the full weight of the state, "I am the Attorney General, and you are in a very large amount of trouble." The color drained from her face. It was fascinating, clinically, not like in a movie. I watched the blood literally leave her face, leaving a pasty gray mask. Her eyes darted between me, Rob, and the broken doorway as her brain tried to compute the new, impossible reality.
I, she stammered. You can't. This is an HOA matter, a civil dispute. You have no jurisdiction. Rob actually chuckled, a cold, sharp sound. Ma'am, this was an HOA matter. It is now a state-level criminal investigation. In the last 3 minutes, I have personally witnessed you commit criminal trespass, breaking and entering, and, he looked at me, what was that about a lien and a 30-day eviction? Ah, yes, attempted coercion and felony harassment of a senior citizen. He pulled his phone from his vest. I was here as a guest, but I am now here as an officer of the court. You've been running a very busy operation, Miss Rourke. Wire fraud, mail fraud, racketeering. It's all here. He tapped the files on my table. Brenda Rourke looked at the papers, then at me. The hatred in her eyes was replaced by something new, raw panic. You trapped me!" she shrieked. "No," I said, my voice quiet. "I am a retired judge, Miss Rourke. I don't set traps. I merely observe as people build their own. You kicked down the door to your own prison cell. I just held it open for you." Rob was already on the phone. "Yes, this is Cantrell. I need 2 state troopers dispatched to my location immediately. We have an individual in custody. And send a message to Sheriff Peters. Tell him his services will not be required." He looked at Brenda. "Tell your attorney in the car he's welcome to join us, or he can start driving because he's now a material witness to a felony. His choice." Brenda Rourke looked at the door. I saw the calculation. She was going to run. "I wouldn't," I advised, almost gently. "The troopers are already at the end of the driveway. I called them 10 minutes ago. I knew you couldn't resist."
Brenda Rourke was arrested in my driveway, right in front of Sarah's unapproved wildflowers. It was quite a scene. Her son-in-law, the attorney, drove away so fast he kicked up gravel. He was disbarred 3 months later. The fallout was, as the papers called it, biblical. The Attorney General's investigation, armed with my files, was swift and brutal. They froze the assets of Crestwood Luxury Developments and the HOA. They found millions in stolen funds. The compromised sheriff resigned for personal reasons a day before he could be indicted. Brenda wasn't just removed as president, she was indicted on 14 federal counts. She's currently serving an 18-year sentence. Her glass and steel monstrosities sit half-finished, a monument to her greed. The HOA was dissolved by the state and put into receivership. A judge, a colleague I knew well, ordered all of the fraudulent liens thrown out. The money they seized was returned, with interest, to Mr. Henderson and Mrs. Albright. The community is quiet again, the right kind of quiet. Yesterday, Mr. Henderson brought me a basket of tomatoes from his garden. He said he's planting double the amount next year, right where Brenda's community standard sign used to be. I'm sitting on the dock, Sarah's dock. It's weathered and the paint is peeling, and it is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I fixed the front door myself, made it stronger. This morning, I did something I hadn't done in 2 years. I went to the local nursery and I bought a new plant, a wild columbine. I planted it right next to the ones Sarah left behind. Brenda Rourke saw a weak old man. She saw a target. She failed to see the judge. She failed to see the husband. And she learned the hard way that you should never, ever try to steal a man's legacy, especially when he's the one who wrote the book on law. My name is Elias Thorne, and that was my chronicle. But I am not the only one. These quiet communities are full of stories, full of battles fought in silence. I've learned that justice isn't always found in a courtroom. Sometimes it's found in a neighbor's courage. Sometimes it's found in a well-kept file. If you believe that the little guy deserves to win, if you believe that integrity must be defended, then subscribe to this channel. we have many more chronicles to share, many more receipts to review.